we are starting to see the convergence of OT and IT, or at least the development of pathways between OT and IT environments. Because what do we like more than ever? More data. So if we can get data out of some of these OT systems and industrial control systems, the more better decisions we can make with that data.
SC Media and our sponsor Arctic Wolf are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. Hi, I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome TJ Johnson, National Cybersecurity Leader at BDAO. Welcome, TJ.
Hey, Todd. How's it going? Glad to be here.
Hey, great to see you again. So I'm curious. Today we're going to be talking about OT, and you indicated that it's kind of a personal hobby of yours. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting where my career and hobby started to intersect. Maybe just only a few years ago, I had. Once upon a time back in the day, I went to Purdue to start my career in electronics engineering. Fast forward, and that changed about 5 times in different career and different degree paths. But I've always kept a love for electronics and have done it really as a hobby on the side, maybe doing some freelance stuff here and there. And I really fell in love with programmable logic controllers, different things like, PIC processors. And there's been some new things that have come out, like, the IoT pieces of technology that have really intrigued me, and have always, had one foot well into that from the hobby standpoint. And then, all of a sudden we're starting to talk about, industrial control systems. And I had an opportunity a number of years ago to, help out, a couple of different companies and on the ICS stuff back when it was called ICS. So it's been a fun ride, and it's been very interesting, and it's really cool to see that, some of the stuff that we're talking about from an OT perspective is kind of colliding with what I consider mostly just a hobby for me. So kind of neat.
Well, that's interesting. So did you have a basement full of electronic parts and stuff as you were growing up?
So you phrased that in the past tense. I do have a basement full of electronics. I've got something that I affectionately call the lab, and I still kind of do a lot of fun things on the weekends and evenings to like build electronics type of things. So keeps me busy, keeps my brain fresh, and gives me a little bit of a break from cybersecurity, I guess.
Well, the reason I ask is my father was an electrical engineer. He worked for a large public utility, which is now Alliant Energy, for 37 years in Wisconsin. And I grew up with this, surrounded by TVs and various stages of repair, radios, oscilloscopes, all of that stuff. But it was always great because you never, when there was something that needed an electrical thing to it, my dad was all about that. And I've told this before in this podcast that I had a model railroad when I was a kid. And one of the problems I had is they had these little switches, and they would stick when you were changing tracks. And so my dad said, well, we can't have that. And so he builds this box with blinking lights on it and relays inside, and I don't know what was inside, but so when I pushed the button, it wouldn't stick. It would switch the track and release it. And so it was kind of handy to have around.
Yeah, it sounds like he was into operational technology himself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, early days, right? The cybersecurity industry has an effectiveness problem. New technologies, vendors, and solutions emerge every year, yet we still see headlines filled with high-profile breaches. Designed to help you monitor, detect, respond, and recover from cyber attacks whenever and wherever they strike, Arctic Wolf provides the first cloud-native security operations platform, empowering organizations of any size to stand up to world-class security operations with the push of a button. Learn more about their suite of fully managed security operations solutions at cicostoriespodcast.com/Arctic Wolf. So, as we look at the evolution of, from ICS to OT now, what has transpired in that evolution as we've shifted from that terminology now into OT?
Well, we all love our new terminology, and I've always called it, ICS or industrial controls, and having a new term, it's something that we do right in the industry, and we have to have an acronym, and here we are talking about OT. Um, Admittedly, I've really only kind of like thought I've heard the term around over the maybe the last handful of years, like maybe 4 or 5 years. And I was thinking, oh, OT, I don't know exactly what that is. And it's like, oh, well, it's the old, SCADA systems, industrial controls and stuff like that. Thinking, oh, I know all about that, pretty intimately. And it's kind of interesting because, and I think it's important in the conversation, especially from a cybersecurity standpoint, because we are starting to see the convergence of OT and IT, or at least the development of pathways between OT and IT environments. Because what do we like more than ever? More data. So if we can get data out of some of these OT systems and industrial control systems, the more better decisions we can make with that data. So seeing a lot of that convergence happening, and this comes in the day where, and I like to kind of make fun of the term air gapped systems, and air gapped OT used to exist, and that was the primary control for that. That's no longer really the case, and really an acceptable method of control these days because of what we want to do from a data standpoint. So
So we're talking about air gapping today and the myth of securing OT. So what's the issue with air gapping, and why do you think so many companies are still using this as a method to protect their systems?
well, I mean, it's a solid method for protection, right? We're looking at like the whole OT ecosystem running in its own environment, and then IT running in its own environment, and never the two shall intersect or intertwine. Um, I think at least now, for most larger companies that have OT systems, air gapping is really probably not accurate in what they're doing. They might be introducing maybe logical segmentation controls like VLANs and maybe some DMZs, but ultimately, with some of these newer systems, industrial control systems that are getting implemented, there are needs and wants to have internet connectivity. You're going to need access to data. There's dashboards and other things like that. So I think air gapping is kind of a misnomer now, because there's just no way you can really effectively control, operate, and have visibility to your OT systems in a true air gapped environment.
So what's driving this need for, connection to the internet, where, a lot of these systems didn't have it for so many years? Why do I need to be connected to the internet to be able to get what I need?
Well, a couple of reasons. To In order to either a provide support from the vendor, and this is one of the things that I see a lot with OT systems, is that vendor support and their need to come into the environment to do analytics, maybe firmware updates, and other things like that. Um, Having that ability is probably one of the keys to requiring internet access. Of course, we'd want to wrap a VPN around that, and create some security around that connectivity. But one of the things that we're seeing quite often is that lack of vendor management, though. When I talk to various organizations about how you're managing your OT systems, a lot of the replies are, "Oh, we've got a vendor doing that. We've got managed services around that, and we don't really need to touch that." And my question is, okay, well, what data are they pulling? Is it being transported securely? And what are they doing with that data? Do we have any expiration requirements on that data? And as far as like coming inbound with like firmware updates, maybe patches and stuff like that, how are those being done? And generally, how are we managing the vendor activities around our OT system? That's probably one of my biggest things that I see a gap in with OT systems right now.
So how do you get visibility into what the vendor is actually doing?
That's a great question, and I think it depends on the vendor, and the contract that you entered with the vendor. Some of them, I think, they want to kind of like hold on to their IP and just give you the data that you need, and maybe not even the data, maybe just dashboards. But it's going to be a hard conversation with the vendor. Maybe looking at some of your classic vendor management techniques, which I feel break down in the OT environment. So in IT, we've been talking about third party risk management for quite a few years now, and I came from the banking industry, and we've been talking about vendor management for years and years. So some of those basic vendor management principles, I think, break down in OT, and there's always been a traditional, set it and forget it. It's its own ecosystem. The vendor has a handle on it, and the other piece that I think is missing is a lot of times IT or traditional IT doesn't get involved in the OT systems as much as they probably should. Some of these OT systems are run by, plant managers and plant engineers, and their grasp on cybersecurity, vendor management, and some of these other, non-sexy things that we do in cybersecurity uh, tend to, get lost.
So is there a cultural difference between the people running the OT stuff and people running the IT stuff?
I think that might be a rhetorical question, right? There is, you've got,
There is.
for sure. I mean, you've got folks that are running these OT systems that might not have a rich knowledge of traditional IT. They're kind of maybe holding on to the race car, the bumper, just kind of screaming like, "Oh my goodness, this stuff is taking off!" Because what's happening in OT right now is, I mean, there's some of these things. They've got Bluetooth capability. You've got Wi-Fi built in. I mean, these chips that are available are allowing these OT vendors the ability to like have so much connectivity. And when you have a traditional plant engineering, for example, is a common um, group that manages OT, they're holding on for dear life to try to understand this and the implications of that. And then the IT folks, a lot of times they're like, that's not my problem, that's their problem. And then all of a sudden we have an issue, and now it's everybody's problem.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So are there things that the IT security people should be learning about OT as they're trying to approach improving the security of those environments?
Uh, I would say yes, big time. One of the things that I've noticed with OT environments, and just chatting about OT, and this kind of came up as I started to intersect my hobby life with my career, is the terminology is even different. you've got things called HMIs, you've got PLCs, you've got SCADA systems, you've got, things called RS-232, RS-485. Stuff is flying at the speed of 10 megs. Some of the terminology I think is going to be key, but when we're talking to IT folks that all of a sudden magically got handed an OT environment or have been starting to get involved in OT environments, what we've been seeing is a continued disconnect. We've got like a lack of governance that continues to happen. Risk assessments don't include OT environments. We've got incident response where, like, if something happens to an OT environment, nobody knows what to do exactly. It's really disconnected. If you talk to somebody that might have found something or something happens, something goes down, the OT still has like their own ecosystem, and it really should be included into like a holistic incident response plan with communication plans and who to contact and what that structure looks like. It One of the biggest problems, and we talked about some of the cool cutting edge OT stuff that's happening and the data that's coming out of these systems. There's still some very ancient equipment out there that's running 1980s technology. As a matter of fact, I was doing a little bit of freelancing just a few years ago, and I even have some show and tell here. This thing was pulled out. I think the date stamp is 2005, and this is considered kind of new. It's really old technology, and some of this stuff can't support some of the newer, I guess you want to call it newer, cybersecurity control sets like identity and access management. This thing I think has like a password, and that's about it. We're gonna have to share it, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't enforce controls like password length and rotation. So there's a lot of challenges with OT that still exist today, and because of the legacy stuff, it's hard for organizations to spend the money to upgrade all of that. It's
I mean,
big
that's what I
money.
was going to ask is why is that? Why are we still running with this old technology? Is it that expensive to retool that, and or is it the I don't know if I should do it now because in 3 years from now there's going to be all this much newer stuff, and maybe I'll wait. I mean, how does an organization decide to make that leap, to make that investment?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is all over the place. It's organizational culture. It's the propensity to spend. You've got, from a cultural standpoint, if it's broke, don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or wait, no, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right. So,
Security will break it for you.
yeah,
So,
security is going to
whatever.
break it for you. And, to like forklift some of this stuff is just really expensive. You look at some of the technologies out there like Siemens and, a couple of the like Automation Direct, that, there's some things that you can do that are a little bit more cost effective, but to forklift out something like that, I mean, it's intrusive. It probably is going to have to take time. If you look at you know some of the classic manufacturing organizations that I've worked with that have floors and robotics and conveyor belts. I mean, to retrofit all of these sensors and the programming and making sure that it works, I don't even know how you structure that over time. Some of it's almost like you have to forklift it out and then just do all brand new fresh.
Mhm.
So it's a massive effort.
And I guess when we compare that to computers where we're swapping in, new hard drives, new PCs, it's not like a whole shop floor that that we have all this
It's
major
true.
equipment that has to be moved, reconfigured, and
Mhm.
and the processes all put together again.
That's true, and there are some companies that are looking to do things and work with other systems and types of systems where you've got maybe servos that are doing some kind of a function where if you wanted to replace the PLCs or the logic behind maybe an automation effort. I've worked with companies and had talked with them about maybe going with a certain vendor that can utilize a different vendor's servos in this specific example, or sensors. So there are things that are starting to happen where these locked down OT vendors are starting to see, all right, well, maybe we can and should work with other vendors and make things happen.
So are you seeing like in the IT security space, are starting to see a lot more movement towards platforms, or larger security companies buying up these other companies and then integrating them into a singular platform, or being able to use other products versus a points
Mhm.
tool solutions? Are we seeing that same kind of thing in the OT security space starting to happen?
We are, especially for some of the newer stuff that's out there. The challenge is we still have a ton of old. I mean, I'll consider it. I'd like to say junk, but some people might might be offended at that.
Don't
But
call their baby ugly.
I was just gonna say, you just took the words right out of my mouth. That actually this thing that I just showed you, 1998 is when this thing came out. This 98 technology. So I mean, that's a lot of years old. So we're still dealing with that, but the newer stuff, I would say absolutely. If and it's probably a value proposition for some of these companies to allow an organization to get data feeds and information out of their PLCs. The company that I work for right now just did a project for an organization that um, we're ingesting, or I should say, we built a system that will ingest logs from the various PLCs on a floor to be able to do analysis on it over time and do some predictive analysis to determine when it might be possible for something to break down or a sensor to go offline because of some reason. So they're using some AI around that, and AI is a huge part of the every conversation right now, and it's kind of interesting to see that happen.
So how does AI, how do you see that impacting this space and wanting visibility into these OT tools?
I think it's the classic AI conversation we're having all around the cybersecurity dinner table these days, where we're just concerned about where's that information going, how is it being produced, is it getting, are we using public tools to be able to transform that data, what are we doing from a data management standpoint? And I think that goes for everything in cyber, right? So we need to have like data management strategies and determine what are we doing with that data, how's that data traversing networks, is it being ingested into an ecosystem that we really don't like, or don't want to have out in the public internet, or be part of a additional search function. So I think it's the same cybersecurity story all around, but AI
Well,
and cyber are wrapped, really.
it'll just make the CISO's job that much easier now that we have AI to add
Yes,
add to the pile, right?
that's true. That's true. Yeah, and it's like it's cool that there's some AI tools out there that are helping us and helping our jobs, right? But it's adding a different dimension of headache, because it's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing here? And it's something as simple as acceptable use policy for our employees, like, hey, don't put this stuff in chat gpt, folks. That would be bad. And
Yeah.
why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, right? So
Yeah, and we know from other implementations of things how effective that is too, without some sort of technical assistance behind that as well. So what sort of are there standards or frameworks or things that for people that are in this OT space that they should be looking at? They're pretty good.
yeah, there are. As a matter of fact, I only know of one real rich one. I mean, there's a couple of models that people can kind of adopt. Like there's something called the Purdue model that kind of like structures of kind of like what we have with the OSI model in networking. But there's, I think it's a IEC. I can't remember it's like a 5-digit number, like 62,443 or something like that. I think it's 443 at the end, and I always remember that, from a security standpoint. But there are models out there that you can use, and I've been seeing that at the college level, they're starting to offer OT classes, not only certificate programs, but classes as part of degree programs. I think it's University of North Carolina, maybe South Carolina, is starting to put out an OT class. So that's pretty cool. And since I do a lot of work with the Illinois Institute of Technology here in Chicago, I'm an adjunct professor there. I'd like to try to figure out how we can introduce an OT class there, at least whether it's part of the certificate program or a larger part of the cybersecurity master's program, which is what I'm mostly part of.
That's a really good idea. Now that I'm thinking about it, I teach some cybersecurity courses and risk management courses at Northwestern,
That's
and
right.
I do not talk about OT security. So I think I've got a gap there. I need to fix. I mean, we may have a slide or
Yeah.
two on it, but there isn't much discussion on that.
And the
Very
same thing with
important topic.
mine. I mean, I teach an incident response class at IIT, and as part of a disaster recovery and business continuity class. And I've just last year started just talking about it. I don't even know if I have a slide on it. I just have, it's part of one of my talk tracks, and we need to level that up a little bit.
That
Um,
that
it, it's huge.
that's a great idea. Well, this has been great, TJ. I think I could keep talking on this topic because I think it is such an important topic today. What final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, new CISOs, current experienced CISOs as they're venturing into this OT security space?
My advice would be embrace, embrace, embrace. I think it's been a classic, like set it and forget it. It's not really my issue, but it really is. The whole air gap thing is kind of a misnomer these days. Where, I mean, there are some organizations that probably still do true air gapping, but their maturity in technology might be pretty low, so they're probably not gathering information, getting data analytics. They're just kind of running a shop that just kind of produces plastic widgets or something, and it is what it is. But embrace OT, understand it, and apply the same cybersecurity principles that we would normally apply to an IT environment to the OT environment as much as possible. Like I said, there's some we can call them language barriers because there are some terminologies that exist there. Understand what those are, why they're important, and bring it into the fold as much as possible. Because I mean, what we're seeing is um, incident response plans not considering OT, vendor management not considering OT, and those are like huge gaps as far as I'm concerned.
Great advice. Thanks a lot today, TJ, for taking the time.
Awesome, Todd. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Arctic Wolf. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.